Welcome to another episode of Two Drink Maximum. I'm your host, Shane Byerly.
I'm your other host, Chase Baxter.
Oh, man.
It's a very super evening tonight.
It is indeed. It's super hot outside and it's super cool in here. We have on the show tonight, we are so excited to have a very cool guest. Jim Krueger is here with us, comic writer.
Welcome, Jim.
Extraordinaire. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show to do this.
Yeah, glad. This seems cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're excited to get into everything and anything, but as we generally usually start the show, what are we drinking tonight?
We're drinking a Negroni.
Very cool. There's a new one for the show. So why a Negroni? Why did you pick a Negroni?
First of all, no one knows where it came from. There are a couple Count Negronis out there who claim credit.
Oh, it's a true mystery.
It's a true mystery.
That's awesome.
And so I love that. And I thought, like, I wanted to learn how to drink like something nasty, something old men drink.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to drink my dad's old fashioned because I grew up in Wisconsin, and there they make it with Sprite and sweet brandy, and it's nasty,
Ooh, yeah.
and it's like Kool-Aid-y, and you know,
Too sweet for you.
And I was like, so let me do something else.
Yeah, right. Let me figure that out. Is the Negroni a drink when you go to a bar? Do you get an eye roll, or a bartender's like, "Oh, easy, I got this. I can make this."
Oh no, there's always kind of a sense of, ooh, okay.
They're excited. They give
Yeah,
you
there's
something new.
there's a little impressing
Nice.
that happens.
Well, it looks delicious. It's red. It's got an orange peel in it. So
What are ingredients for the Negroni? For people at home?
it's gin, dry gin, the better, or
Right.
cheaper gin, the
The
better.
cheaper the British gin, the better.
Nice. Okay, so cheap gin, the better. And then there's Campari, which is red. That's all I know about
Yeah.
Campari.
And that's a bitter.
That's a bitters. Okay, and then there's sweet vermouth,
Yeah.
not dry vermouth, sweet vermouth in it, and then
Yeah.
an orange.
And you can have it on the rocks or not.
Well, let's take a sip. Cheers.
Let's
Cheers.
cheers, everybody.
Yeah. Cheers.
Clinky drinky.
That's good. That's really good too, especially because it's a little bit bitter on the back end,
Yeah.
which gives it a sense of refreshing that you don't get from a super sweet drink.
Yeah.
You know,
It's that like, it starts off sweet and then
it's dangerous because it's bitter on the back end, which makes you thirsty. So you
Yeah.
want another sip.
immediately one other sip.
So
I always want another sip.
you're probably sitting here thinking, I've definitely heard the name Jim Krueger before, and you have, because Jim has written for so many comics, and he's obviously written huge stories for both Marvel and DC. One of the titles that you might know him from the Marvel universe is Earth X, and one of the titles that you might know him from the DC universe is Justice. Chase and I are huge comic fans in general, but we are both diehard Batman fans.
Correct.
So first question I can't resist. What was that like getting the opportunity to write for the Justice League? All of the characters, but obviously specifically Batman.
Oh, it was so great. And there's even this small little Batman story that I'll have to get you,
Nice.
which is the origin of Batman told from the cave.
Okay.
Okay.
You
That's
know,
fun.
and the first line is like, every cave has a mouth. Why don't you think I also have a voice?
Yeah.
Then it goes
Oh,
on
awesome.
from there. And so it's like the giving tree and stuff like that. And when he first falls in the cave, because I'm so influenced by Miller's Batman,
Yeah.
Arrow and stuff like that. When he first falls into the cave, you know, the cave is overjoyed.
Company.
Yeah. Other than the bats themselves, it's the cave is like, and I was so excited. I was so excited that there was no mom or dad
Yeah.
to tell him he couldn't live in a cave. And so it like takes the whole tragedy and makes it like this fairy tale
Flips
for
it a
the
little
cave.
bit. Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah, I absolutely would love to read a copy of that for
Yeah.
sure.
And then Justice, getting to write Justice
Yeah.
with Batman was a blast. But
Yeah.
I mean, I got to work with Alex Ross
Yeah.
again, but who painted it. And so it's just such
I
a
was
beautiful
gonna,
piece of
I was gonna
work.
bring that up. Alex Ross is some amazing art to go along with your writing. Like
Yeah, I mean, there's no one like him. There's no one like it at all.
everything hand painted. What as realistic as you can get inside a comic book, I guess.
Alex
It's
Ross
kind
is one of
amazing.
those artists, and this is, I think, the highest compliment you can give an artist, which is you just see one of his paintings and you instantly know it's Alex Ross.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
and you
he
get
was,
to put words to that.
yeah. And he was so influenced by that first Superman, the Christopher Reeves Superman
Absolutely.
movie, Flash Gordon and Tommy.
Right.
And that kind of makes the triumvirate of like everything he ever wanted to do. And,
Yeah.
you know, he takes such pride in doing every wrinkle in a costume and anything to make a hero be as real as possible, he goes for.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions that I've just been so curious to actually talk to somebody of your caliber about is that I imagine, when you start out writing for DC or Marvel, they don't just they don't give you the keys to the kingdom, right? You can just get one character, you get a one arc or whatever. To do a maxi series like this and to be in control of literally the entire DC for a universe or whatever for a bit, what is that process like? I mean, I imagine that you were given creative control, but I also imagine there's a team of editors who are making sure that you don't go too far off the rails or do anything that doesn't align with DC's policies or future story arcs.
And you got to do a lot in Justice. There's absolutely everybody you can imagine from DC inside of Justice.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was really lucky. I think there was a little pressure at the beginning of the project to do like an origin of the Justice League type of story.
Sure.
But from the beginning, Alex and I were just like, no, let's do the equivalent of Super Friends, like a really serious Super Friends, Justice League versus Legion of Doom. And each issue will be narrated by a different member of the Justice League, so we're kind of in their mind, in their voice, and all that kind of thing. And there were some editorial notes. I think my favorite though was the first issue is narrated by Lex Luthor. And at the time, Dan DiDio was really upset with that narration because he thought the argument against superheroes was too good.
Yeah, that's
And he's like, Lex Luthor wakes up and,
But it's Lex Luthor. Of course his argument would be good.
Yeah, of course it would. And basically he was like, look, we don't have to solve nuclear Armageddon because we have superheroes to pull the weapons from the sky.
Yeah.
So it makes mankind lazy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's one of the best parts about Justice is that somewhere around issue 3 or 4, before the story flips and you kind of you start to understand the real essence of the story, you start siding with these supervillains. Really, yeah, we don't need the Justice League. What are you talking about? They're not doing it. They're not curing cancer.
We weren't really fixing anything yet.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. It's such a great story. But what is that pressure like? I mean, because obviously when you write a story like this, that so many people have so much connection to these characters. And I mean this from Marvel and DC. And I don't mean that in a very, kind of like objective. It's subjective to me. Like I'm counting on folks like you to treat the characters that I love with respect and to do it right. I mean, what is that pressure like, when you're actually doing it where it's like, you want to do a good job, but you're also feeling fan pressure of, well, they don't like it if I do this, that, whatever. How do you balance that?
Well, you know what? I mean, when I first got to Hollywood, I was able to have this amazing, like, luckier than I deserve lunch with Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
And he gave me two pieces of writing advice that are in my pantheon. If I have a top 10 or a top 15, this is what you have to do. He gave me two pieces because we're talking about film and TV and comics and series of novels and anything that has chapter after chapter after chapter.
And forgive me, do you remember what year this might have been, just so we can zoom in on Sam Raimi's filmography so far?
Oh, yeah. He was just finishing post-production on
For Love of the Game.
Love of the Game.
There you go.
Yeah.
The voice of God coming in from the side there.
A fact checker.
And so it was at that point, and I hadn't even moved to Hollywood yet, actually. I was just, I was at the beginning of my writing career.
Sure.
And I, because he and I are both Midwesterners, I had found an address and started sending him comic books.
Nice.
And
Nice.
That's awesome.
And letters of like, ooh, I love this when you did this, and blah, 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 all that kind of thing.
Evil Dead. Yeah.
And he said, okay, so you have to accomplish two things. One, you have to take the story further. Like there has to be real advancement of the story every time you do a new chapter or whatever. And he said, and this was so important, especially, he said, you have to remind people why they love this character in this world in the first place. And that's not nostalgia. It's not like Star Wars Episode 7, It's more like finding and zeroing on that primal love for these characters. So when it came to Justice, it was always me being like, okay, how do we move the plot forward? How do we do this? How do we show the character in a way we've never seen them before, or maybe do some sort of clever spin? But it's also, how do I remind people why this character is so important to them and why they've survived so many years?
Yeah.
And in those moments, is it like giving them a physical like action win inside the story, or hitting an emotional note that maybe people haven't felt before?
Sometimes it's just like, it doesn't matter. It can like it can just be something different. Like, I think my single favorite page of Justice was Batman and Superman in front of the Fortress of Solitude. And Batman, in the midst of it, tells Superman, he's like, wow, you're so smart, telling people you could look through walls and you had X-ray vision. He's like, who would dare commit a crime in your city? And then Batman says, and people say I'm the smart one.
Yeah.
Like, I was so happy with that.
Yeah.
It felt like such a win and kind of a insight. And so it's like that. It's like so much of it is luck.
Yeah.
True.
Like,
Well, happy accidents.
yeah, like you're looking at the pieces and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, some of it's luck, but a lot of it is love too. And as an avid comics reader, sometimes I'm not going to throw out names, but sometimes when you read comics, especially from Marvel, DC, you can tell when someone's heart's in a book versus whether they're just getting a paycheck writing this thing. You know.
Sure.
And it's and when you read Justice, it's like, okay, you and Alex, you guys love these characters.
Oh yeah,
You
and
know?
sometimes I didn't even know I loved the character until I wrote the character.
Yeah.
Especially in Earth X, like I didn't love Iron Man or the Hulk until I got to write their origins in it and give them some dialogue and be
Yeah.
like, oh, this is why this character is so important.
Well, and the coolest thing that you got to do with Earth X, right, which was before Justice, was that because you got to do it in kind of a dystopian world, kind of an alternate universe type deal, you got to really make your own rules with everything and everybody.
Oh yeah.
And that has got to be so satisfying. I mean, and your work's still being referenced today, which we'll get to in a big way. But I did not realize until I just read it a couple of nights ago that your Spider-Man was one of the Spider-Men in Across the Spider-Verse.
Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know?
I forgot that's another one.
He's in the gang that Miguel assembles to go get Miles Morales as he's trying to escape. But there he is.
Old man, overweight.
Yeah.
Peter Parker.
Yeah, my Peter Parker is what you're saying.
Real life, you're like Peter Parker.
Yeah, exactly. So you worked your way up through Marvel before you got a chance to write anything from them, and obviously Earth X is one of those crowning achievements. But what was that like, getting to break all the rules with characters that are as just beloved as the Justice League and DC? Was there more pressure because you were younger?
Well, what was really am I allowed to swear on this show?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was working at Marvel as initially copywriter, then senior copywriter, then creative director. And I'd
Fun
done a
jump,
couple.
by the way.
Oh.
that's an amazing jump inside an organization.
Yeah,
So
no,
there you
it was really lucky.
Yeah.
But I know because I had done one of my first indie projects, Foot Soldiers, for Dark Horse, and some different things, that there was some bad blood between me and editors. But I was marketing, and I was allowed to do so because I was marketing, and it was freelance or advertising. And so I remember going by a guy's office, and he didn't know I was outside, but he had gotten the call that I was writing Earth X. Oh, no. And I heard him go, "Fuck Jim Krueger."
You go,
And then
yeah.
I swore in that moment that one day that would change to "Fuck Jim Krueger."
Nice.
Get the comment. there.
Prove that guy wrong. Yeah. Now, by the way, just to back up for a second, not me. I'm very smart. But for dumb people in the audience, what is a copywriter? What do they do?
Oh, I wrote advertising.
Gotcha. Okay. Because you have a degree in marketing, correct?
Yeah, a degree in marketing and journalism, and I mean, my first couple jobs were writing ads for the Sheboygan fishing tournaments in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and stuff like that.
So you started off as Don Draper, and then you just moved your way into becoming the Jim Krueger of comics. There you go. Fair enough. That's really cool. Do you feel like having a background in marketing affected especially when you're writing the big league stuff, did you feel like you had a better grip on this is what people like, this is why people come to Marvel?
I don't know if it was a better grip. I think it was just kind of a sense of I knew how to turn a phrase.
Sure.
And I liked doing that.
Yeah.
Like I was writing ads for the Batman Daredevil team up when DC Marvel crossovers happened, and my headline was, "One became a bat, the other's as blind as one." It was just fun.
Yeah.
When Ghost Rider 2099 came out, it was like the vicious cycle begins again.
Yeah.
It was stuff like that I love
Comics,
doing.
the last bastion of a good pun.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. I imagine that maybe put you on a different, like it gave you like a stronger foothold than maybe other writers without that background just didn't have. And, if there are people listening who are not familiar with Earth X, Earth X was such a massive seismic shift in the Marvel or in the Marvel universe that the effects of Earth X are still being felt in properties that I'm sure a lot of people are being felt today. I mean, obviously a lot of Eternals was based on your storylines from Earth X, but you were just saying before we started recording, there are so many properties that have little bits and pieces.
How many things is that touched
you
by
mentioned
now?
Spider-Man, and there's Thor, and Moon Knight came out of the Universe X Moon Knight section.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about Eternals is when Earth X first came out, Kevin Feige was such a fan of it.
Yeah.
And of the Foot Soldiers project that I had a couple meetings with him, and he was like, "Man, I just want to make Earth X the movie, but we don't have the rights to Spider-Man. We don't have because they didn't at the time. We don't have the rights to X-Men. We don't." And I remember telling him, you could do it with the Eternals.
Yeah.
And then, 20-something years later, it happened. So that was really exciting.
And you're sitting there watching the movie and you're like, man, this looks really familiar.
I remember a lot of this.
I was invited to it, and Alex and I were having conversations, and Alex was like, they're going to do it. They're going to do the big reveal, blah, blah, blah. I was like, you don't think they're going to stretch it out a little bit? And he's like, no, I know they're going to do it. And then when the invite came to go to the premiere, I was like, okay, they're going to touch on this, I think. And then it was just sitting and watching. And that was wild.
Yeah, and then you're seeing like, man, I created this. This is so cool. Yeah. I mean, and this, when Kevin Feige was a fan, that would have been 99 because that's when Earth X came out. Feige worked on the X-Men movies first, right? So that was like 01, 02 when that first one came out. So this was before Kevin Feige was Kevin Feige, all capital letters.
I think it was like post-Blade or post-Blade 2. I kept on wondering, because he asked me what I thought about the Blade movies, and I was like, well, the big question I had with the first one was, if everyone turns into vampires, what do they eat? And then that became a line in the third one. And then I said, and plus now it's weird for Blade because you find that there are vampire clans that have nobility and stuff like that in the second one. So now Blade's just a murderer unless he finds out first. And that's why we got the big bad Dracula in the third one.
Yeah.
So
Jason and I have been kicking around this idea. We'd love to like be responsible for rebooting that dark universe that Universal they kind of ready, fire, aimed on that.
That comes up every time we have like.
But like that would be so cool to do like an Avengers style universe, and I guess like the Thanos like for the first part would be Dracula, just like really big bad Dracula, and everybody has to team up to stop him. But like that would be incredible, I think. And you kind of got to touch on that. So yeah, we're stealing your ideas too, man.
Awesome.
We didn't even know it.
As if I haven't stolen.
Yeah. So how does it work? I mean, because both Earth X and Justice won Eisner Awards. So for people who don't know, that is like the Oscars of comics.
Yeah.
There is no higher achievement in comics than the Eisner Award. So,
but the greatest thing about the Eisner Award is from that point on, you can bring 10 guests into Comic-Con every year.
Nice.
That is the thing that
that
you
alone is worth it.
I thought you were going to say free booze at the ceremony. That's what I thought you were. No, but so once you've won, I mean, what happens now where, because you're not a staff writer for Marvel or DC, you're way beyond that. But if you come up with a great idea and you've got it kind of worked out an outline, can you just call Marvel and say like, hey, I've got an idea for this, that,
Yeah. Or like DC, there's a Superman story I'm dying to tell.
Yeah.
I'm just like, email the editor.
Get Jim Lee on the phone. Let's go. Yeah, that's got to be neat though. But like, but I imagine the pressure to top yourself since both of your two biggest outings won Eisner Awards. It's like, great, now I got to win an Oscar again.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel that kind of pressure.
I mean, do you chase the awards, or it's just a nice bonus?
Oh, it's a nice bonus.
Yeah,
it's a nice bonus.
Just write something good. Just worry about that, right?
Yeah. And like just like when I was like writing Earth X, it's like, oh, this is what needs to happen with this character, or oh, I really always wanted this for this character. And,
right.
I did a Spider-Man one-shot. So you're telling us
it's just you living out your fanboy dreams on the page in front of everybody?
Yeah, like I got to do a Spider-Man one-shot. Peter's like, he's having the same nightmare over and over where he's at a jail and he's visiting a prisoner, and then he doesn't know which side of the bars he's on because the Vulture or whoever constantly escapes. So is he the one imprisoned by it and stuff like that? He's going through all this stuff with Aunt May, and he's not sleeping or anything like that. And Aunt May, and he's still feeling guilt about Uncle Ben. And Aunt May says to him, do you realize that if your Uncle Ben knew how his death would bring this city a hero, he would have gladly laid down his life? He'd be proud of you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's never been said.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just getting to write something that seems like it's so important to the character.
But it's just never been articulated or
Yeah.
written down before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's all that lucky stuff, you
Right.
know, because there have been so many gifted writers, so many gifted artists on this stuff. And to stumble upon something that hasn't been said before is amazing.
Is pretty cool. Very much so.
Is that what potentially drew you to writing for like the superhero genre in the world? Just because you have so much latitude to sort of explore kind of outrageous and fantastical
Yeah,
things.
that sounds so strategic and insightful, and that's just not me. It's been accidental. Every step forward has been accidental.
That's fine.
Happy
too.
accidents,
You
though,
know,
it sounds like.
like for example, when Foot Soldiers first was in the planning stages, I was still, you know, I was in New York and taking a bus back to Montclair, and I'm sitting in the back, and I see some guy reading a magazine that had an ad for the new Johnny Quest magazine, and I was like, or the new Johnny Quest show, and I'm like, there's no way it's as good as the old one. And he's like, no, I agree with you, and stuff like that. And then he saw the art I had in my hand that I was going through, and he's like, oh, what's that? I described to him what Foot Soldiers was and stuff like that, and he gives me his card and says, you know, me and my partner, we make movies. You know, maybe we should talk. I really love that idea. And I said, well, would I know any of the movies you make? And he goes, yeah, I produce all the Batman movies.
Nice.
So,
Hey,
you know,
riding the bus.
And ultimately, he became the first voice in my life teaching me how to write screenplays.
That's awesome.
So, like, when I say it's like accidental, you know, lucky.
You just be at the right place at the right time.
I mean, I have lots of unluck too.
Sure.
But, you know,
That is the writer's life, I imagine. A lot. You got to, just like any creative pursuit, you got to be willing to take a lot of no's before you get a yes. But
yeah.
well, and I mean, moving away from superhero stuff, I mean, as you kind of mentioned earlier, I mean, you've written some stuff for Dark Horse. I mean, for those who are unaware with the comics field, there's Image Comics. I mean, there's Vertigo. There's all sorts of stuff that is not superhero related. There's all these indie labels, and you've written for many of them. You even started your own. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. I've done some
26
self-publishing. I've
Yeah.
done some self-publishing, developed some different formats that even Marvel and DC eventually used, and all kinds of stuff.
Well, in the best way possible, because of what I would call the digital revolution in comics, the indie comic scene feels like the wild, wild west in the best way possible, where it's just there's so much stuff out there, you know, and so because there's so much stuff out there, the wheels are kind of off in terms of whatever you want to do to make a good comic. Do you find that freeing? And if so, like, what are the things that you've enjoyed writing, kind of outside of the chains of major publication? And I would say major publication, just DC and Marvel, but like with Image or Dark Horse or whatever.
Yeah, no. I love my own stuff so much, of course, because I live with it for so long before it comes out. Like I mentioned Foot Soldiers, and that began as creating characters that were going to be like mascots for products. Like Johnny Stomp was going to be an odor eaters guy, and I was like, ooh, I could do that. That would be really good. And, you know, and just it was playing with things, and that's such a collection of like the influences that really made me like a want to tell stories and stuff like that.
Sure.
But then, you know, I have a giant like Jules Vernian thing called Clockmaker that I never finished. There's a project that's like Batman is a Western that I still have to finish. And,
Nice.
you know, a lot of times I won't do superheroes. Like even Foot Soldiers is post superheroes.
Sure.
But then I'll do something like the No Ones, which is about a bunch of superheroes who are really into their egos and they get cursed to insignificance. So no matter what they do, it'll be forgotten. So a lot of times what I do is it's more of an investigation of a concept or an idea.
Sure. And you find that to be, you find that to be a little bit more satisfying just personally?
I don't know if it's more satisfying or less satisfying. It's like I like things that limit me, because then I feel like I can be more creative in it. And that's part of even writing a Superman. It's like you have to make sure it seems like Superman and people resonate with Superman, because I'm like, if it doesn't feel like the true Superman, people will reject it. And then it's one of those stories that is forgotten. Like you can push Superman, you can push him in this direction, this direction, this direction, but I'm kind of interested in writing stories, and this goes back to the idea of chasing awards. It's not chasing awards, but it's writing stories that seem so quintessential, that character, that people want to read it again and again to remind themselves of what makes that character great.
Yeah. Well, I don't know who said it. Somebody probably huge, but they were talking about the reason why writing superheroes can be difficult is because you're constantly writing second act. That's all you get to do, right? Because the first act is already ready. The origin stories are well done at this point, and you don't get to kill off Superman. You're not that, you know what I mean? Nobody, when the people killed off Superman in '96, they still didn't kill him off. They brought him back.
they had to bring him
Oh
back.
yeah.
You know, and so it's like you're writing second act stuff, and you're just passing the baton to the next guy or girl to write that comic. So it feels a little challenging in the sense that you can't go totally off the rails. But in that box, there feels like total freedom to do what you want to do, and that's got to be cool.
Yeah, and you have to do that with every IP. You
Yeah.
know, whether you're doing Star Wars or you're doing Indiana Jones or whatever.
You're walking into a room that already exists, so you got to figure out how to push the walls the little bit you can.
Yeah,
Because-
and yet be so true to it that people don't reject it.
Yeah.
And it's really that like otherwise something gets forgotten or something gets debated forever because people hate it. And
Did you ever get one of those reviews? Did you ever do something that maybe just missed a little bit?
well, I definitely got reviews that were like, "I hate Jim Krueger," blah blah blah. Blah. But that's probably that same editor in his office. So, so who
The one
knows?
guy with a burner account on Twitter.
But you know, I mean, you try to be as true as possible, and you know, I've never had a bad experience with one of my editors. Like every note
Right.
is great. Every note is like, you can't do that. Like, probably one of the greatest moments in Earth X is the small moment where I was going to have Reed Richards put on the Cerebro helmet so he'd be able to understand why everyone on Earth has mutated. And the editor, all very up in arms, was like, no, you can't do that because that only works for Reed Richards or that only works for Charles Xavier's brain. And I'm like, oh,
I melt his brain.
but Reed Richards can stretch.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
all he needs is a schematic and he'll mold his brain to be like Charles Xavier's.
Boom.
And then you have the thing being
So
like,
clever.
so you mean you stretched your mind? You know, and there was the joke waiting
great,
to happen.
yeah.
And it was great, all because the editor
Problem
said,
solved.
no, here's the rule. And like, that's why you have to respect the rules because the rules define, you know,
The
and then
decades of
creativity
character.
happens when there's a rule saying no.
So, I mean, touching on just something I'd mentioned earlier, because there's in the best way possible, there's so many comics out there now. And whether you're shopping online or whether you go into a comic book store on Tuesday, Wednesday, what do you look for? If you're going into a comic book shop and you're looking at the wall of new releases,
Oh, yeah.
what are you looking for? What's a good comic to you? Or is it okay to judge a comic by its cover? Or like when you go in with your hard-earned money, what are you looking for?
It's usually characters I care about,
Sure.
but it is a cover, or it is an artist, or it is a writer I'm following. You know, and I was a kid in the '80s. I missed the days where I would go to the comic shop, and the '80s was when the comic shop really became a big deal, and all the new issues were there, and you had never seen any of the covers.
Yeah.
Like it was before previews, it was before all that stuff where every week it was just like, oh my gosh, how many of these am I going to get?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wait, I didn't even know that was going to happen in that issue. Or here's a guest star that I didn't even know.
The beauty of the surprise is a little
Yeah.
destroyed by social media.
Yeah, it really is. And so I miss that experience. And I try to still go to the comic shop every week if I can. I always try to look at something I've never looked at before.
Yeah.
But I just ended I had so many Daredevils for so long and I collected Daredevil, but I just quit Daredevil.
Yeah.
Just quit Daredevil.
Yeah, that was hard. It wasn't hard. It was just this habit. But
Eventually, you got to cut because a buddy of mine, shout out to my friend Adam. He said, because we're both avid comic readers, but he goes, I got to stop buying them physically because he goes, the worst part about buying a comic is after you're done with it, you still have a comic to deal with.
It's still there.
And he's like, I have too many white long boxes in my house.
I mean, I buy all the Marvel Masterworks. I have
Yeah.
a full collection of those.
Yeah. Those are not cheap, but they are very nicely like bound. They're so nice.
Yeah, and the back issues are like the back volumes are now worth money. So it's like, oh, it's kind of an investment. That's
Yeah.
okay. And I don't buy comics to invest.
Yeah, I was going to
I'm
ask,
like,
is that a game that you play? Because there's a lot of people in
No.
the world that
No, not
could
at
probably
all.
not care what's inside the comic, but because it's the right number and time frame, they gotta scoop it up.
I don't play that game, but I'm kind of like, you know what? I know I'll probably do more Marvel comics. I'll probably write more DC comics. Having all this reference is good.
Yeah.
So
Well, speaking of investing, I think it's time for us to invest in another beverage because I'm looking at 3 empty glasses, and I think we're going to need to do that.
True,
so
true.
We're going to take a quick break. We will be right back with Jim Krueger. You know, Chase and I might be new to the podcast game, but we do know enough that the best podcast should be recorded in an environment that really kind of spurs your creativity. And we're lucky enough to record our podcast in the Muse Rooms, which is a creative co-working shared space that we are proud to have as a sponsor, and we could not be more excited.
Yeah, you can check out the Muse Rooms online to learn more about their services and the spaces they have here. Lots of really great stuff. That is themuserooms.com. That's M-U-S-E for Muse. You can also check them out on Instagram at the Muse Rooms. But have a look at it. There's tons of great amenities. It's a really wonderful environment, like you said, and it just goes a long way in making our show amazing.
Agreed. We couldn't be happier, and we think you might be too. So please check out the Muse Rooms, and we will see you there.
Yeah, and now for part 2. Welcome back from the break. We are here with Jim Krueger, author, impresario of every IP you've ever heard of, Marvel, DC. You got The Matrix on the list somewhere in there.
And Negroni drinker.
And Negroni drinker. That's where we've got another refill of Negronis. So my first question for you is going to be the most important impression any writer has to make on the reader is that very first sentence. So when you're working on projects like this, how do you arrive at that first line? Like, what are some things you think about to make that hook to get somebody to go through an entire book?
And I don't even know how to answer that question other than to say that there's always a piece of dialogue or a moment in it, in that issue, in that book, in that screenplay or whatever that I'm building towards. And so the first line has to begin to hint at that thing I'm writing to make happen.
Okay. So you're an echoes writer. You want to broadcast a little bit of things that are coming in the future.
Yeah,
so
I want to
set the stage for everybody.
I want to John the Baptist it a little bit.
Well, so how did you, what was your history? Did you know from the very beginning as a child, I wanted to be a writer? Did you feel like you kind of fell into it?
The first origin story has to be this trip when I was 6 that my parents took to Disney World.
Okay.
And a couple things happened on this trip that was so amazing. One, we went to, because I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there was a little train to Chicago, and in Chicago, my dad bought my brother a Batman comic and me a Superman comic, and I was so pissed.
Because you
I was
already
so
have-
upset. Like, Batman's cool, and Superman was not. It's so funny because now I'm kind of like, okay, this is origin, because now I have the Superman story I really want to tell one day.
Yeah.
But that said, and then we got on a different train, sleeping compartment, all that stuff, on our way to Florida as Florida was hit by a hurricane.
Whoa.
And so my dad was like, when I was in the military, the weather changes really quick. Anyhow, we get down there, we're in our orange or our yellow, things, and the storm is still going. And my dad's like, they say it's supposed to end at any point. And, there's a train that goes around, around the entire thing. And so you have to kind of go underneath the tunnel, and there are lockers and stuff like that before you come out on the other side, and you're on Main Street and you see the castle and blah, 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 all that kind of thing. Well, in entering the tunnel and coming out on the other side, the storm really did break. So I came out on the other side, and you had these shafts of light shooting down and reflecting and ricocheting off the puddles with the castle and stuff like that. And I was amazed. My dad said the most perfect words ever. He said, "Now you know why they call it the Magic Kingdom." And I swear he fucked me up forever in that moment.
You were forever broken.
Yeah, that was a little unfair. That was like God's special effects.
Right?
It's hard to compete with that. Yeah.
It was like,
Here you go, son. This is magic.
it was like Rod Serling.
Props to your dad though for taking credit though. For
yeah, totally. And then you know what? I think in grade school I was a born liar and made up all kinds of excuses for not doing homework and stuff like that. It kind of led to stuff.
Sure.
And then I didn't know what I wanted to be when I was all growed up, and so I went into business/advertising, and I knew I was good at popping jokes and saying things. And so I decided to become a copywriter, and bit by bit, one thing kind of led to another. And then I was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, writing ads for the Sheboygan fishing tournament. And those ads, probably this is an important story, I never got the client approval
No?
Just went
It
out with
just
them?
went into the newspaper and on billboards. What was the Rotary Club?
They're happy
And
with whatever.
I couldn't see them like approving, a billboard that said "Hang out with the local hookers," Sheboygan, or keep your fly open
Buy
for 3
local.
days in August.
That's great.
But it got all kinds of notice.
That's
and
amazing.
It was really
Mission
really a
accomplished.
lucky
That's
time.
the bottom line. Is
Yeah.
it probably got people to show up, right?
Yeah. And
You
so,
still have copies of those?
Yeah. And
Hang it up at like as a poster in your house, like a,
Yeah,
like
I
a
don't
miniature
think I have
billboard.
any of them up as posters, but
Was
I
that
writing
was that your proudest bit of copywriting? Have
no,
your-
I did a campaign for Preparation H that I really loved.
Okay.
Like with headlines like "Blazing Saddles" and "Fire in the Hole,"
Nice,
smoking
yeah.
Got to do
crack,
all of those.
stuff like that.
Yeah, that was your Volkswagen Lemon moment.
So it was stuff like that. And then at one point, I was a
It
junior
sounds like Austin
copywriter.
Powers owes you some papers as well.
It was ish. I just realized that finding jobs in Wisconsin was tough, especially without a big portfolio and stuff like that of actually published work. And so I knew Marvel, and so I did a campaign for myself, like a 6-part campaign.
Really?
And every 3 days, their creative director, who was a Don Draper, like this is the guy who created Boo Berry and Frankenberry and Count Chocula in the day. He wrote
Okay.
lines like, "Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't."
Classic.
And he was a writer on the Johnny Carson Tonight Show.
Wow.
And this was kind
Street
of his,
cred.
Yeah.
so much. And so every 3 days he would get another piece of advertising on Jim Krueger. One of the ads said, there were a couple that talked about how I knew the issues of their business.
So you wrote all these like you were advertising yourself.
Right. And there was one that said in the last 6 months, I've witnessed a beating, found homeless people living in my basement, and been held at gunpoint. And then it opened up and said, "I think I'm ready for New York." All that stuff was true, by the way.
Yeah.
And I think the last one, I sent my portfolio out, and then the last one said, "I hear you're looking for someone to write copy in your advertising department." And then it would open up and handwritten, it said, "Copy in your advertising department." I'm like, hiring. And it was just like stuff like that. And I sent them my portfolio, and they were like, "Yeah, this looks really great. If we have an opening, blah, 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 we'll let you know." And I was like, "Well, how about if I come out anyhow
Yeah.
and just meet with you?" And then
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And so I did. I got on a train and, got on a plane and headed to New York, met them. It was all good. And 3 months later, I was living in New York.
Wow. That's
Badass.
incredible, though.
Yeah, it was really...
But you know what? I think that that what you did was really, really smart. And I think that so many people who are creating stuff or want to get into creative fields today, they're so focused on just the actual work itself that they do forget that there are people who are gatekeepers. There are people who have to read these things, right? And they have to enjoy them first, right? It's like one of the biggest examples that when people ask me, I want to write screenplays, what screenplay should I read? I always put them over to Shane Black's scripts. I don't know if you've read like Lethal Weapon or
They're the best. They're the best. They're so much fun.
Super
because
clever.
Shane Black knows that the first person who has to read this script is an executive's assistant at William Morris
Who doesn't want to read a script?
who doesn't want to read a script. And there's all these in jokes about like how scripts work and how reading scripts work.
Yeah. They drive up to the mansion I'm going to buy when this sells for $3 million. It's like that. Oh, yeah.
And it makes it fun, and you did that with copywriting where it's like, you weren't just focused solely on the quality of the ads because you knew you had it.
Nice Guys and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang are two of my favorite films of all time.
I love both those. He's such a great writer.
He's so great.
Yeah. That movie Predator got kind of crapped on, but I liked it. I
They're all
enjoyed
fun.
that.
It was still fun.
They're all
Yeah.
fun.
And again, Boyd Holbrook, one of my favorite young
Long
upcoming
Kiss
actors.
Goodnight is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So
he's awesome.
It
Anyway,
is absolutely important to know your audience when you're writing anything. So what is the quintessential comic reader that you imagine when you're writing something?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, am I going to want to read this again? Every time.
sure.
Every time.
Are you a tough audience to please?
If there's one thing in it that I think is great, then everything else is forgivable.
Okay, nice.
How do you personally know when you're done with something?
Either when I need that check as quick as possible.
Sure.
Spoken like a true writer.
you know,
You're a working writer, dude. There's no shame in that.
Or when I'm like, oh yeah, that worked. Oh, I'm so glad.
Okay.
And someone else has to read this before I can, because I never assume my job is completely done. I just assume it's done for now. Sure. And then it needs to go in someone else's hands. And then they'll give me feedback or give me notes, or if something's not clear, any of those things are possible. And
Sure.
like, I'm not precious except for usually one piece of dialogue in a script.
Okay. But you do feel a sense of completion in the sense that some writers never feel like they're done. It just gets ripped out of their hands when the deadline comes, and it's like, well, that's finished, I guess. But you feel like you mostly get to a place where you're like, I'm good. I like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's got to be. I can't imagine that feeling.
See, that's
of like
where I'm not
never
a real
feeling
writer.
Done, right?
That's where I'm just kind of a lucky faker.
You decided to skip all the temperamentalness of being a writer and just be like, yeah, we're cool with whatever. It's great.
Yeah, time for another Negroni.
Well, but the other thing too is you've always got so many balls juggling up in the air that it's like, frankly, you don't have the time to hyper focus on one thing forever.
Well, and plus I have so many other stories I want to write.
Yeah.
Like, I have list upon list upon list.
Are you guilty of starting things without having finished other things?
No.
Oh, good for you.
No, but I'm definitely guilty of having long-term projects where I'll whittle away at them every couple years. Where I'm like, oh, that's that idea, and I couldn't do this before because I didn't know that, or I hadn't experienced this point of life, or I didn't hate myself enough before to be able to fulfill this character now.
What was the longest one you've had in development like that?
I have a Peter Pan trilogy that I've yet to do, but it's definitely the
Still in
Earth
the
X.
works.
It's the Earth X of the Peter Pan
The Peter Pan world. Yeah.
world. Like,
Nice. Okay. I'm in already. I mean, if it's as good as good as Earth X, I'm in. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
But a lot of misfires in the Peter Pan world too.
There
It seems like.
But
tough.
you know what? Like, I think the misfires all come out of people not reading the J.M. Barrie stuff.
Sure.
People not reading they base it on Disney, and I love Disney so much. So this isn't dissing Disney.
No.
But and you see it a little bit with like Finding Neverland. But,
the actual
his
stories
big thing is that it is dangerous and wrong to not grow up.
Yeah.
And we've embraced the opposite of that for Peter Pan.
Right. Right.
Like, there's a cautionary thing to Peter Pan.
There's a whole lot of that story telling you, like, this isn't great what Peter Pan is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I won't even say anymore.
We don't want to spoil your story.
Yeah, don't spoil it. Yeah.
We want you to write it.
Yeah. Sometimes you kind of fall down the YouTube rabbit hole and you start watching clips. I assure you, I did not see this whole movie, but I remember watching this clip and being like, am I on drugs? What's happening? Hugh Jackman was like playing Captain Hook.
Yeah, he was Hook.
And he was singing Nirvana. Like, and there was like a Nirvana, like the whole like ship was doing this like Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I was like, what is happening? This is awful. This is
I don't know which one that was.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That was a bad one.
Yeah.
That was the Warner Brothers one.
Yeah. Okay.
You know.
So the point is,
this
Sorry,
is
Warner Brothers, I love you.
Yeah. That was. This is now in the
Thanks for
public
letting me
domain.
write justice, Warner Brothers. You're
Just
the
kidding.
best. I love you so much.
I mean, look, the bottom line is, it sounds like there's fertile soil there to be, be tilled and cultivated, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very cool.
And my trilogy is like nothing else. Like, it's hardcore.
Sure. All right. All
Don't
right.
spoil it. Don't spoil it. We want to hear it. We want to read it.
What about do you feel like you getting your start as a professional writer back when you got your start, do you feel like it's radically different to anybody who's trying to break into the industry today?
Well, what's great about the industry today is like when I was breaking in, really there were two ways. One, there was either a friend that brought you in, or you already worked in the industry. As you mentioned, the indie is like the wild, wild west. You can do a book. You can put out a book. It's like putting something out on YouTube, You can put out a book and have enough people like it that someone at Marvel or DC wants to grab that writer first and bring them in. And so, it's so much easier to become a Marvel or DC writer now than 10, 20 years ago.
Sure.
But at the same time, your competition is that much bigger.
Yeah.
Right. Because everybody can do it.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same with making films. Everybody's phone now can shoot 4K Dolby Vision, which is like, that's like the highest quality peak cinema. And like, I remember when like Chase and I were in film school, it was like, it's higher quality than we could ever, our cell phones can shoot better footage than the best cameras we could afford in film school.
that mini DV
awful
amazingness.
DV. Yeah, you know, and so it's great because the next Francis Ford Coppola or the next Elmore Leonard or whatever could be sitting out there. But the problem is because everybody has access to it and they all have the tools, now it's just harder to break above the noise, you know? But is that if someone's, because you've written video games, you've written screenplays, you've written comics. I mean,
what won't you write?
Oh, I'm working into prose now.
Oh, there you go.
Nice. There you go.
Yeah.
He's like, I won't do preparation H anymore.
Book of poetry, perhaps.
No,
Yeah.
I'm a writer now, or I'm no longer a writer. I'm a user. So
There you go. Yeah. Well, you got into some of those other things because your talent just spilled over. Do you think if you're trying to get in now, should someone try to kind of hyper-focus? If you want to write comics, focus on writing comics. Stop that novel, right? Or stop that screenplay, focus on comics. Or is it kind of, do you feel like as a working writer today, it's kind of like you got to be a jack of all trades?
I think you have to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And it's not even necessarily jack of all trades. It's like, you just have to want to tell stories and go for it, and then trust that whether it works this way or that way, you may eventually get there anyhow, because someone could read your novel and be like, oh, there's clearly a heroic thing here. I wonder if they want to do comics, you know, or screenplay writers, or, you know, it could go anywhere. And like, my career has been like this accidental stumbling into one thing after another.
Right. Like a drunken sailor kind of stumbling into landmines, but in the best way possible.
Really good
A
landmark.
drunken sailor who drinks Negronis.
Negronis, a Negroni drunken sailor. That's awesome, though. Yeah, I mean, there are so many people who want to break into this industry and they want to do it that, you know, getting to hear advice from somebody who actually gets to walk the walk has got to be invaluable. What was the first moment that you had that you knew, I'm good at this, I can do this? Was it the first paycheck?
Yeah, has it happened yet? You know, I feel like every dumb thing you do, I'm like, oh, people are going to read this, and I'm never going to have to hustle for work again.
Yeah.
Wrong.
And then you still do.
It's all hustling. It's all hunger. But my pitches have gotten better. Like my ability to, you know, go into a room and be like, okay, here's the idea. This is why it's important. This is why you want to buy this today.
Right.
You know, that's become better.
Sure. How long are pitch meetings these days anymore? 10 minutes? 15?
Yeah, 10, 15 minutes. And like when I was first here in LA, like hour long, but then I realized that doesn't work. So clearly I have to bring it to you in a way that if you have questions, great, but you're able to tell the idea, not all the different pieces that I've worked out and stuff like that beforehand.
Sure.
So, you know, even that's learning. It's all learning. So
Yeah.
Is it just throwing a log line at him? Or like, how do you, like, what's the best tip for making a good pitch?
part of it is, I think, just being fun. Because my theory, and I think this is right on, is if people don't want to party with you, they don't want to work with you.
Sure.
So it's just the energy.
The process is getting notes. The process is dealing with questions. And if you're pitching people and they don't feel like they can work with you, they don't feel like they want to get a drink with you or eat messy sandwiches with you,
Right.
you're done.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
I've never thought about that before, but you're absolutely right. Why would you want to work with somebody that you don't want to get a beer with?
Yeah.
Well, there's a
and
lot
life's
of-
too long. It's painful.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of interactions in the creative process that aren't the creative process. You want to have somebody that is not a complete nightmare to deal with in those moments.
Yeah, and I mean, it's tough because we all become writers because, we're introverts and we're sad, misunderstood actors who can never get in front of a camera.
Right,
and
right.
So it's like, oh, and yet, you have to embrace being friends with people. In fact, that gets to the big friends. It's not, or the big thing. It's show friends. It's not show business.
Yeah.
You have lawyers for that.
Right.
But
right.
you have managers for that. But
Yeah.
every time I go into a room in the hopes of working with this person, I'm like, oh, we're going to have to become friends. If this is going to happen.
Creativity is a very intimate process, so it helps if you can stand to be in the room with the other person for longer than 10 minutes.
Right. Well, and I mean, both comics and films have that in common. Where you can't make it unless you're Todd McFarlane. You can't make a comic by yourself.
No.
Right. There's editors. There's artists. There's
Oh my
publishers.
gosh,
There's all sorts
I have the worst Todd McFarlane story.
Oh no.
What? Please
Hit
tell.
me.
But it's
I love
it's,
Todd McFarlane.
to his credit. Me too.
Yeah.
So you know how Spider-Man #1 came out years and years ago?
Yeah.
I wanted to be a writer so bad that I took it. I blew up the issue to like 11 by 17 pages. I whited out all the word balloons and rewrote it with my words.
Oh, hell yeah.
You Stan Lee'd it.
Reprinted
Nice,
it.
okay.
And then took it to Todd and gave it to Todd just in case he was looking for a writer.
Hey.
While Todd was developing his own abilities and talents as a writer. It like 25 years later, I finally got to apologize to him for the sheer audacity of it.
Did he take it in good spirits?
Oh, he
though?
was so kind. He was like, "Oh, if I had known it was you, I would have actually read it." So it was a diss, and at the same time, it was a compliment.
That was the nicest diss of all time. It was a diss and a hug. Yeah.
What did you? How did you change that story when you did that? Did you just make something completely new?
No, I didn't change like the story because his art told the story. It was just a different nuance as far as like caption boxes and poetry and all that kind of thing, because I was such a student of what Alan Moore was doing in Swamp Thing. Like I just wanted everything to read
Alan Moore.
like his first 12 issues of Swamp Thing.
Yeah. His run on Swamp
Or
Thing
Frank
was
Miller's Daredevil. Like both those things I lift up as like the best comics has ever
iconic.
been.
Yeah, for sure.
I
Yeah.
live in a world where I'm still waiting for a really, really good Swamp Thing movie to come out because it's such a fun character.
Did you guys watch the Swamp Thing show?
I didn't see
Yeah, I
enough
thought
of
it
the
was
show.
great.
Did you? I like because it was on the DC.
It was dark.
They
It was
canceled it
really
immediately.
dark.
That's all I know about it.
Yeah, and it was on the DC app, and I didn't have it at the time. And then, like right around the time, I was like, "All right, I'll get around to this." They canceled the show.
Yeah.
And now I imagine you just have to find. You could probably buy it on iTunes or something. But you're saying it's good. It was worth
Yeah,
watching.
it's great.
Yeah?
It's
Okay.
like horror. It's got aspects of Evil Dead in it.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
got like
So
Always
better
solid.
than the Wes Craven or who directed?
no, you're right. It was,
was Wes Craven. Yeah,
Was
okay.
You know,
Yeah. Oof.
even without Adrienne Barbeau.
Yeah, she was the highlight of that movie because the rest
I
of those
watched
were
those
bad.
old ones so much. It was so much fun.
Yeah. Oh man.
Is there a character that you have wanted to work with that you've not gotten to work with yet?
I mentioned earlier that I have a Superman thing
Yeah.
I'm dying to do.
Yeah.
Like it changes one little piece of his origin, but I think it makes all the difference in the world.
Well, dude, you never know. You might
Interesting
get your
tease.
shot. I mean, that James Gunn's doing the Superman movie, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
going to ignite a whole new.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
going to ignite a whole new passion for Superman, and DC's going to be. They're going to need good comics to sell right around the release of Superman. So
Yeah, yeah.
who knows? Maybe the universes are aligning, and
Yeah.
you might get your shot to pitch them.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
hear
And that
that
goes
story.
back to that original Superman comic book my dad bought me in Chicago that pissed me off. So
Nice. There
it's
you
all
go.
good.
You've been sitting.
Yeah,
You've been
it's full
vindictive. Yeah. That's amazing. Well, I hope you get the chance to do it, man. If you do, you've at least sold 2 issues for sure.
Right? I'm there
Nice.
for it.
Yeah.
Nice.
So what are you in terms of stuff that you're working on currently? Or is there anything that you're working on that you can talk about that you're excited? I know there's a few things you can't, but
Yeah, well, I'm doing a YA novel for Steve Aoki right now. It's
Yeah.
part of his Hero Quest.
Is it about throwing cakes at people?
No, there is no cake throwing so far, but I'm not finished
So
with
far,
the
okay.
novel. So who knows?
You gotta have one. You gotta have
But
one.
it's
Steve
really
Aoki.
fun and it's
Yeah.
really challenging and
Nice.
it's been awesome and he's a blast to work with.
yeah. Seems like a cool dude.
And in the next couple years, I've been working towards, and this is not comics too, but I will talk about comics.
Anything and
I've
everything.
I've been working on an advent calendar of holiday horror. So
Okay.
it'll be 25 haunted Christmas stories,
All right.
Nice.
and
Okay.
some of them are prequels or sequels to classic, public domain Christmas things. But there's this long history of, from like Charles Dickens to Nightmare Before Christmas to even Little Match Girl of haunted Christmas
Yeah, it's a thing.
stories. And so I've been developing that for years, and that's coming out. On the comic side, I just finished my first draft of a brand new graphic novel for John Carpenter's company.
Oh.
Hey.
John and Sandy Carpenter.
Really?
And it's a graphic novel I created called The H Train, and it's about a bunch of people who get on a train in Times Square headed to Union Square. And instead of the train getting there, the train goes to hell.
Ah.
Okay.
And then they all begin to turn on each other and blame each other for why they're in hell.
Sure.
Well,
There you go.
demons are dragging them off, and it's horror and stuff like that. But it's a little murder mystery too.
Yeah.
to a
Yeah,
degree.
fun.
So
Whatever that play is, the hell is other people quote.
Yeah. Especially on a subway. Yeah.
so
Everything is hell on a subway.
It is, and that goes back to my days in New York and all the kind of things. So I love that, and Alex and I keep on talking about more Earth X stuff, and
Nice.
we still talk all the time.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I mean, dude, it sounds like you've got some really cool, exciting projects coming out, and I, for one, can't wait to read them all.
Yeah, thanks.
Who's some of the authors that you're watching right now?
That makes it sound like he's stalking authors. I think you meant to say reading.
Reading, watching, whatever you like.
on the comic side, you know, I'm a giant Jason Aaron fan. I think his run on Thor was amazing, but if you've ever read his run on Ghost Rider,
it's
his
really
run
good.
on Ghost Rider is miraculous. It's like a grindhouse heaven and hell thing that's really exciting. Like, he does some comedy stuff, and I never love the comedy stuff as much as I love his really serious stuff.
Yeah. He just did, Marvel just did a, like, they do these little series called, like, whatever character, red, white, and black. And so they just did one on Darth Vader. So it was like Darth Vader, red, black, and white. And so Jason Aaron wrote what would essentially amount to one comic, but it was split into 4 parts. And it was just a badass Vader story that, you know, that just had not been told. And you're like, man, Jason Aaron, he's, you know, he's Jim Krueger level of good, talented writing.
That's so sweet. It's so the opposite of what you should say. I do want to write a Star Wars one-shot about the dinner in Empire Strikes Back. You know, when Han and Chewie, they come in, and there's Darth Vader and Boba Fett. And just, it seems like the most uncomfortable Thanksgiving meal ever.
Yeah.
But also, Darth Vader is so adamant about dinner actually happening.
Because I'd be that guy.
We're eating first.
Yeah, did he take his helmet off to eat? And were they all did they all lose their appetite as a result? Like,
I'd be that one guy. I'd be like, look, this is tense, but the chicken is getting cold, and I am starving. I have not eaten since noon. Amazing. Well, Jim, where can people keep up with you? I mean, obviously, everyone's going to want to keep up with like what you're doing.
You know, probably Instagram is the best.
Sure.
I'm Jim Krueger, like the letter I, the letter M, and then
you got
Jim
lucky
Krueger.
You got it before somebody beat you out.
Yeah, well.
Spell it one more time.
The letter I, the letter M, and then GIMKRUEGER.
Nice.
Awesome. And I have one last question. What is your best tip for writers in the world to continue writing and pursue their goals as a writer?
Don't quit. Keep drinking.
Preferably Negronis.
Preferably Negronis.
No, I don't want my Campari. You know, I don't want there to be a Campari shortage in the world. That would be so wrong.
Don't drink Negronis. Find your own drink, people.
And don't quit. Keep drinking. Don't quit.
Yeah.
Drinking.
Yeah.
It goes both ways.
It's a full circle type deal. The two kind of bleed into each other.
You know,
Nice.
but that said, I do 3 things every day as a writer. I read something, I watch something, and I write something. And I consider it a day wasted if I haven't done all 3.
Nice.
Awesome.
So that's like a creative workout. I like that.
Yeah, because you have to feed, like you put so much in your writing, you have to feed 2.
Yeah.
And so I would say that.
Nice.
Thank you. That's amazing advice.
Awesome. Jim, thank you so much for stopping
Oh my
by.
gosh,
We
this
really
was a blast.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Can we have you back on the show when when the next thing comes out? We've got some exciting stuff to talk about.
Definitely need to hear about whenever your Superman project comes out, because I'm sure it's going to happen.
Yeah. We'll push for it. We'll get Jim Lee. We'll get James Gunn on the phone. We'll make
Yeah, we'll make some calls.
We'll give it the 2 drink maximum bump.
If that's a thing.
Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate it. We will see you guys next episode.
Thank you. Yes, you can follow us on Instagram at 2 Drink Maximum. And yeah, let's stream the show anywhere podcasts are streamed. And thanks for joining us today.
Cheers.
Cheers.